Today we're going to finish the story of Joseph. You remember Joseph was Jacob's favourite son, which was bad because Jacob had 12 sons. Joseph had strange dreams about his brothers bowing down before him. His brothers didn't like Joseph much and ended up selling him as a slave, and he was taken to Egypt. In Egypt, Joseph trusted in God and was looked after, but then was wrongly thrown into prison. In prison, Joseph was put in charge of the other prisoners. And we heard about two special prisoners. Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, had sent his head butler and chief baker to prison. Each of them had a strange dream, and God gave Joseph the meaning of the dreams, which proved true, and the butler was restored, and the baker was hanged. Okay, that's the summary of the story so far. Joseph is still in prison in Egypt. His father Jacob thinks he's dead, and the butler that he helped has forgotten all about him. So a couple of years go past, and now it's Pharaoh's time to dream. Pharaoh had two very odd dreams in one night. In his first dream, he was stood by the river, and out of the river walked 7 fat cows, looking well fed and looked after. Then 7 more cows walked out of the river, but these were skinny and ill and didn't look good at all. Then the 7 skinny cows ate the 7 fat cows, but didn't get any bigger. The dream woke Pharaoh up, and he thought about his dream, and he fell asleep again. In his second dream, he was in a field, and 7 ears of corn grew up from one stalk, and they were full and looked good. And as he watched, 7 other ears of corn grew up, and these were diseased and bad, and the diseased corn ate the good corn. Pharaoh woke up again. He thought about both his dreams, and he wasn't very happy. In the morning, Pharaoh called for his wise men, and he told them his dream, but none of them could tell him what they meant. The butler was standing there, and he remembered Joseph in the prison. The butler spoke to Pharaoh and said,
"I remember when you put myself and your baker in prison. Both of us dreamed one night, and we told our dreams to a Hebrew slave, and he told us what they meant. And he was right. I was given my place as butler, and the baker was hanged."
So Pharaoh sent,
"Get Joseph!"
And Joseph got washed, shaved and dressed and was brought before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph,
"I have been told that you can tell the meaning of dreams."
Joseph said, "No, I can't, but God can and will give you an answer." Pharaoh told Joseph his dreams about the 7 fat cows and the 7 skinny cows that ate them up, and the 7 full and good ears of corn and the 7 skinny ears that ate them up. God gave Joseph the meaning of Pharaoh's dreams, and Joseph said to Pharaoh, "Both your dreams have the same meaning. God is showing you what will happen. The 7 fat cows and the 7 good ears of corn are 7 good years. The 7 thin cows and the 7 skinny ears are 7 bad years. There will be 7 years of plenty throughout the land when the crops will be plentiful and the cattle will be fat. After these 7 years will come 7 bad years when the crops won't grow and the cattle will grow weak. It will be terrible. You had 2 dreams with the same meaning because God has confirmed this will happen. You need to find a wise man to look after the whole of Egypt. During the 7 years of plenty, you should store up 1/5 of all the crops and keep them for the years of famine. And in this way, God will look after Egypt." Well, Pharaoh and his servants were convinced by Joseph. They knew what he said was true. Pharaoh said to his servants,
"Can we find someone else like Joseph? It's clear that God is with him and speaks to him."
He said to Joseph,
"You will rule. You will be second in command over Egypt."
Pharaoh put his ring on Joseph's hand and put fine clothes on him and gave him a gold chain around his neck. He gave him a chariot and made everyone kneel before Joseph as ruler of the country. Joseph was 30 years old and in charge of the whole of Egypt. He'd come a long way since looking after his dad's sheep as a boy with his brothers. And Pharaoh gave Joseph a new name,
Zaphnath-Paneah,
which means the man to whom secrets are revealed. And Joseph got married to an Egyptian lady called Asenath, and Joseph oversaw all the land of Egypt during the 7 years of plenty that followed, and made sure they saved up enough food. And during those 7 years, Joseph and Asenath had 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And for 7 years, life was really good. Then everything changed. The weather was bad, the crops failed, and all across the land there was a lack of food. But thanks to Joseph's planning, there was plenty to eat in Egypt, and people came from all over to buy food. Back home, Jacob, Joseph's dad, and his family were also struggling. He told his sons to go to Egypt and buy food, and so the 10 older brothers all went to Egypt. Now from Canaan to Egypt is almost 700 miles. That's over 1,000 kilometres. That's a really long way and would have taken them a long time. And they didn't have cars either. They had donkeys. You can see how desperate they were. 700 miles on a donkey. In Egypt, they were directed to Zapnath-Paneah, who was in charge. Now Joseph recognised his brothers, even though 20 years had passed since he'd seen them, but he disguised himself. Why? Well, the last time he had seen them, they threw him in a well and only pulled him out to sell him as a slave. As his brothers bowed down before him, Joseph remembered the dreams he'd had, which said this would happen. God was right, and his brothers were wrong. Joseph asked where they had come from. They said from Canaan to buy food. Joseph called them liars! You must be spies! They said, no, we're brothers, and the youngest has stayed home with Dad. Joseph told them, you can't leave unless the youngest brother comes to join you. I'm going to put you in prison for 3 days. Wow. Maybe Joseph was being a bit mean. He knew his brothers were speaking the truth, but he wanted to test them. On the 3rd day, he said, one of you must stay here and the rest may take food back to Canaan and bring your younger brother. The brothers talked amongst themselves. What do you think they talked about? They talked about Joseph and how maybe they were now being punished for how they had treated him before. And so Simeon stayed behind as prisoner while the others took food back to Canaan. Joseph ordered his servants to fill the brothers' sacks with corn and put the money back in the top of the sacks. When they stopped on the way home, one of them opened his sack to get some food for his donkey and saw money. They didn't understand what had happened. Why was there money back in their sacks? When they got home, they told Jacob all that had happened. When they said that they had to return with Benjamin, Jacob was beside himself. I've lost Joseph, you've left Simeon behind, and now you want to take Benjamin away from me too? No, I won't have it. But before long, the food ran out, and Jacob told his sons to go again to Egypt. They said, we can't go back without Benjamin. Judah said to Jacob, I will take the responsibility. Let me take Benjamin. I promise that I will bring him back with us. Okay, said Jacob, but take presents with you and double money to pay this time and for last time. May God be with you so that all my sons may return. And so they went again to Egypt. When Joseph saw that they had brought Benjamin with them, he prepared a feast for them to eat with him. The brothers were all scared. They thought Joseph was going to arrest them. They told Joseph's steward what had happened, how they had found the money in their sacks, but had brought it back with more money and gifts. Joseph said, don't worry, I returned the money to you. Your God is with you. He brought Simeon back to them. They all bowed down before him again. Joseph felt his brothers had changed, but he wanted to be sure. He told his steward, fill their sacks with food and put the money in the top once again, and take this special silver cup and place it in Benjamin's bag. When his brothers were on their way, he told his steward to go after them and accuse them of stealing. The brothers said, why would we steal? We even brought back twice as much money this time to give you. If any one of us has stolen anything, then let him die. They were that sure that none of them had stolen anything. And so the steward went through their sacks, starting with the oldest, and when he came down to Benjamin and found the cup, he took them all back to Joseph. Joseph said, I will keep Benjamin here as a slave. The rest of you can go free. Judah said, no, we will all be your servants. We can't go back to our father without Benjamin. It would break his heart. Joseph said, no, only Benjamin needs to stay. But Judah pleaded, let me stay in Benjamin's place. When Joseph saw that Judah was willing to sacrifice himself for Benjamin, he told them, I am Joseph, who you sold as a slave. But don't be sad about what has happened. It was all part of God's plan to send me ahead and prepare for us. We're 2 years into this famine, and there's 5 more years to come. We will all live here. And so Jacob and the family all came to Egypt, and God looked after them all. All the way through Joseph's story, we've seen God at work looking out for Joseph, and no matter what happened, God had a plan. There's a verse in Jeremiah that talks about God's plans for us. Whatever might happen in our lives, God is there ready and willing and able to give you strength and guidance. Just as with Joseph, God desires each of us to put our faith and trust in him. He loves us and cares for us and has a plan for each of us as we put our faith and trust in him. God knows we're not perfect, but he wants to help us to become perfect as we follow his Son, the Lord Jesus. Will you choose to follow him today? Thank you for listening.